Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, read by Little Book Owl. Chapter 1. In a certain town there was a public house in which Oliver was born. The parish surgeon brought him into the world. At first it was doubtful whether the child would survive. After a long struggle he began to breathe and then sneezed. Paused between this world and next, Oliver gave many anxious moments to those around him. Had Oliver a group of relatives near him at this time, it is possible he may not have survived. But there was no one except an old pauper woman, and Oliver had to learn to fend for himself from the first moment of his birth. So there are advantages of being born in a public building like a workhouse. Hearing Oliver's cry, the young and feeble woman who had given him birth said, "Please, let me see the child. Then I want to die." "Don't speak of dying yet," said the surgeon, but the mother seemed to have no desire to live. She took the child in her arms and quietly slipped it into the realms of death. Oliver lost his mother within a few moments of his birth. This was the beginning of his misfortune, which would extend through long years. The doctor and the nurse shook their head in sorrow and sympathy. The surgeon was about to leave. He said that he should be called in case the child was restless. Then he asked, "Where did this lady come from? She's very good looking." "Last night she was lying in the street. The overseer ordered that she be brought in. It seemed as though she had been walking some distance. Where she came from or where she was going to is not known." The surgeon looked at the dead woman's left hand and said, "Oh, no wedding ring, as usual," as though that explained everything. When he had gone, the nurse, who was addicted to the bottle, went back to it, and Oliver was left alone to cry as much as he could. An orphan cannot expect nothing better. This was his lot for the next 8 or 10 months. The beadle of this workhouse, Mr. Bumble, was very proud of his quick intelligence and flashes of inspiration. He named the children who came to the workhouse alphabetically. The child who had been born before Oliver was named with an S. When Mrs. Mann, the caretaker of the babies, asked him who had named Oliver, Mr. Bumble proudly announced that it was he who had done it. Mrs. Mann was full of admiration. "Oh, Mr. Bumble, this is great." "Yes, the last one was named Swumble. I named him. Next had to be with a T, so this one will be Twist. I named him." He seemed pleased with himself and spoke in a manner congratulating himself for a task well done. He drank his quinine and water in the same mode. This was the state of affairs till Oliver's 9th birthday. He grew up to be a small and thin child, but he had a very sturdy spirit inside him. The diet given to the children at the workhouse was insufficient to supplement it. There was always a good thrashing. On his birthday, Oliver and 2 other kids received only this. Then all the three were locked up in the coal cellar. Suddenly the caretaker observed that Mr. Bumble was coming to see the children. He expressed great joy at seeing him, but he was very angry. He considered himself to be an important man. When he found that the gate of the workhouse was locked and he had to wait for it to be opened, he spoke harshly to the caretaker for neglecting her duties. "Mrs. Mann, I have come on business and cannot wait around wasting time," he said. Mrs. Mann coaxed him out of his ill humor and offered him a drink. Soon Mr. Bumble was convinced that the caretaker was a humane, motherly woman, looking after the children of the workhouse as her own. He promised that he would recommend her name for better things to the officials of the parish. Mr. Bumble's business that day had to do with Oliver. "He is now old enough," the beadle told the caretaker. "He should be taken back to the house. I have to take him there. Let me see the boy." Oliver had by now been washing and scrubbing, and the caretaker brought him into the room. "Make your bow to the gentleman," she said. Oliver did as he was told, and the beadle spoke to him. "Would you like to come with me?" Oliver wanted to consent eagerly, but he saw that Mrs. Mann wanted him to pretend that he was sad at leaving her. So he said, "Will she come along too?" Mr. Bumble shook his head, but assured him that she would come to see him sometimes. Oliver was relieved. Of course, he was going to leave behind the only friends he had in the whole world, and this made him sad. Mrs. Mann bade Oliver good-bye with scores of embraces, a piece of bread, and a brown cloth cap to put on his head. As the gate closed behind him, Oliver burst into tears. The wide world appeared lonely and frightening to him. In the workhouse, Oliver had to appear before the board. Mr. Bumble took him there and introduced him. Oliver was frightened at the sight of so many gentlemen. One of them, sitting in a high chair, said, "Do you know you're an orphan?" Oliver did not know what that was. They explained that he had no father or mother. Oliver understood and started crying. The men were surprised. "Why does he cry?" "He's a fool," said another gentleman. Then they asked him if he prayed every day. No one had taught Oliver to pray. Otherwise, he was an obedient child and would have done so. "You have been brought here to be educated and take part in some useful trade," he was told. Oliver bowed down low and went away. For 6 months he lived in the workhouse, without much disturbance, but the slow starvation which the children in the workhouse were subjected to was unbearable. One tall boy resolved that unless he was given another bowl of gruel, he might eat the tiny boy who slept beside him. His tone was serious, so the children held a conference to decide what to do. Oliver was chosen to make that demand known. That evening, at the meal room, Oliver told the master who was serving them, "Sir, I want more." The master could not believe his ears. After a long silence, he said in a faint voice, "What did you say?" Picked up the ladle and aimed a blow at Oliver. Then he shouted for the beadle. The bird was sitting in another room. Mr. Bumble rushed there and spoke to the gentleman sitting in the high rank chair. "Mr. Lippin, I'm sorry to say this, but Oliver has asked for more." Everyone in the room looked horrified. How dare anyone ask for more after eating his allotted share? A serious discussion took place on the crisis that had arisen. Oliver was to be locked up in a room alone. Next morning, an announcement was put up outside the gate. It said that anyone who took Oliver off the hands of the parish would get a reward of £5. So, those who were looking for an apprentice would have one and also an additional £5 as incentive. The grave gentlemen were certain that Oliver had been born to be hanged. A boy who was so daring at such a small age was sure to reach no other end. Fate had only this in store for his future. Chapter 2. For a week, Oliver was kept in his prison. He was unhappy in loneliness. He cried all day and at night, tried with his small hands to keep the darkness out of his sight. He woke up with the starts of fear and hugged the cold walls for protection and comfort. One morning, Oliver's fate was about to change. Mr. Gamfield, the chimney sweep, saw the bill on the gate and came to inquire about the update. He was ready to take Oliver away. There was discussion among the board. It was decided that the chimney sweep was risky, and they did not approve of it because many little boys died while doing the job. But much pleading and bargaining by the chimney sweep made them send for Oliver. As soon as Oliver was told of his fate, he started crying and said he would not go with so dreadful a person. The magistrate considered the matter once more. Mr. Bumble tried to insist that no heed be paid to the words of a mere child. Those who stood in the place of his parents knew better, but the magistrate would hear none of it. "Take the boy back to the workhouse and treat him with kindness," he ordered. So Oliver was once more available to. Since the first offer had not materialized, the board thought that it would be a good idea to send him to be a sailor. The skipper may be able to tame so unruly a boy as Oliver by beating him regularly. Mr. Bumble was in the meantime sent out to ask around if there was anyone desirous of taking in Oliver. He failed to find Oliver a place in the sailing vessel, but when he was coming home disappointed, he met Mr. Sowerberry, the undertaker. He had just returned from measuring 2 women who had died the day before. Mr. Bumble congratulated him and said that he could soon become a very rich man by making huge profit in the coffin business. They spoke on this for some time. Then the beadle asked the undertaker if he knew of anyone in the trade who wanted a small boy as apprentice. He added that the term was very liberal, as they were offering £5 for the boy. The undertaker said that he contributed generously towards the upkeep of the poor. He deserved something in return. "Mr. Bumble, I think I'll take the boy," said Mr. Sowerberry. After getting clearance from the board, Oliver was made over to the undertaker as his apprentice. Oliver cried again and said to the beadle, how frightened he was of loneliness. But the only reply he got was that he was ungrateful brat. When they reached the undertaker's house, Oliver made his bow. Mr. Silverberry called his wife and showed her the boy, who had just arrived from the workhouse. "Oh dear, he's very small!" she exclaimed. "Yes, that is he, but he will soon grow," replied the beetle. "Of course, by eating our food, I see that Paris children are of no use. They cause more trouble than they're worth. However, since he is here, let's see what can be done. Go down to the kitchen, boy." So saying, she kicked him down the stairs. The maid, Caroline, was working here. Her mistress told her to give the boy the meat that was kept aside for the dog's trip. "You don't mind eating that, do you?" she asked Oliver, but Oliver was excited at the mention of the word meat. He ate meat. He ate with eagerness that the dog might have rejected. He reached every bite of the food laid before him. The lady regarded his hungry attack of the food with silent horror, seeing in it the future appetite of the boy. Finally she said, "Have you finished?" Oliver saw that there was nothing more within reach which he could eat, so he said that he had finished. The lady took him up and said, "You have to sleep among the coffins. I'm sure you don't mind. Even if you do, there's no help for it because you can't sleep anywhere else." Oliver felt desolate in that small room, surrounded by coffins, but he fell asleep after some time. He was woken in the morning by a loud noise. Someone was kicking the door. His first instinct was to hide, but when the person outside went on kicking, he was forced to get up. Someone was shouting, "Open the door, I say, and fast!" Timidly, Oliver replied, "I will do so directly, sir." "You must be the new boy," the voice said through the door. "Yes, sir," said Oliver. "What is your age?" "10, sir." "Then I shall give you the beating of your life when I see you." Oliver opened the door fearfully. Life had taught him that his daily diet was incomplete without some sort of physical torture. He still feared it, but when he looked outside, he found no one there. At a little distance there was a charity boy who was greedily eating bread and cheese. Oliver went up to him differently and said, "Did you knock, sir?" "I did not knock. I kicked." "Did you come for a coffin, sir?" Oliver wanted to know in an innocent manner. "So you don't know who I am? I am Noah Claypole, and you are to work under me, so no jokes, mind." Then he added, "First, take the shutters, you lazy, good-for-nothing fellow." This was followed by a swift kick aimed at Oliver. Oliver took down the shutters according to the order, and in his hurry to carry away the first one, broke a window panel. Noah told him he would get severe punishment if he was not careful, and finally considered to help him. Mrs. Silverberry came down, and Oliver was kicked for breaking the pane. Then both Oliver and Noah went down to breakfast. Charlotte called Noah. near the fire and gave him a piece of bacon left over from the master's breakfast. Then she told Oliver to go out and eat what was put on the cover of the break pan. Noah made fun of Oliver being an orphan, and Charlotte joined him in laughter. Noah was also a charity boy, but he knew who his parents were. Earlier he had been laughed at. Now that he had found Oliver, he decided to take revenge on this poor little orphan for all he had suffered at the hands of others. Oliver continued in the state at the undertaker's for more than 3 weeks. When Mr. Sudbury got an idea, he asked his wife about using Oliver as a mute in the funeral of a child. "He's so good-looking." "Well, he eats enough to be so," exclaimed his wife. "Well, he eats enough to be so," exclaimed his wife. The novelty of the idea struck Mrs. Sudbury, so it was decided that Oliver should be put in the new role as soon as possible. The opportunity came the following morning when Mr. Bumble came to order a coffin and funeral for a member of the family of Bayton. He said that they were very proud, and he seemed so angry at their behavior that he forgot to ask about Oliver. The boy was not displeased because he had been frightened by the mere sound of Mr. Bumble's voice. Mr. Sudbury told Noah to mind the shop. He asked Oliver to put on his cap, and they set off. They walked on for some time and looked for the house they wanted. Then they found the house. A girl of about 14 opened the door. There were signs of grief, and the undertaker knew that he had come to the right house. The husband of the dead woman was crazy with sorrow and would not allow the body to be measured. The mother was lamenting that she was alive while her daughter had died. Mr. Sudbury was used to all this and went about his business with a tape. Later, he and Oliver returned to the shop. The next day, Oliver accompanied his master one more to the dairy house. This time Mr. Bumble was also there, with 4 men to carry the coffin. The coffin was hoisted on the shoulder of the bearers. They set off in the direction of the churchyard. Mr. Sudbury had been hurrying them, saying that the clergyman would be waiting for them. Oliver had to run to keep pace with his master's long legs. But when they arrived, they realized there had been no need to hurry. The clergyman had not arrived, and the clerk said he might be late by another hour. They waited in the rain. Some boys, attracted by the scene, came and played over the coffin. Mr. Bumble hit 1 or 2 of them for spoiling the solemn atmosphere. He and Mr. Sudbury went to the clerk and sat down, reading the paper with him. As soon as the clergyman was seen coming, they hurried back again. In about 4 minutes, the burial service was over. Mr. Sudbury told the grave diggers to fill up the grave. The husband of the dead woman stood like a stone till he was asked to leave the yard. He fell down in a swoon. The mother was wailing still, but more for the loss of her clock than for her daughter. Sudbury walked along with Oliver homeward. He asked, "How did you like it, boy?" "It was all right, sir. Not very nice," replied Oliver. "You'll soon get used to it, and then it will be all right," said Sudbury. Oliver thought about all that he had seen and heard, and wondered how it had taken Mrs. Sudbury to get used to it. Chapter 3. After the trial of 1 month, Oliver's detectiveship was made formal. It was a time when the coffin business improved, and Oliver acquired much experience by accompanying his master to most adult funerals too. He learned how people who were totally grief-stricken at one moment could sit and be cheerful at the next moment as if nothing had happened. He was amazed and full of admiration. Noah was not happy with Oliver's presence in the house. He constantly looked out of opportunity to tease the little boy. He called him "Work for us" as an insult, referred to Oliver's birth and upbringing. One day at dinner time, Noah and Oliver were sharing a piece of mutton. Charlotte was away from the kitchen. He put his feet on the tablecloth and pulled Oliver's hair, tweaked his ears, and cursed him. He said that he was waiting to see Oliver hanged. Then, not satisfied with all these, he said, "How was your mother?" Oliver became red and angry. He was very close to tears as he replied, "She's dead. Don't say a word about her."
"How did she die?"
Of a broken heart, the old nurse told me.
"Nonsense! Do you know your mother was a bad woman?"
Oliver looked up at Noah quickly as he heard this. Noah repeated this comment about Oliver's mother. Oliver could not control himself any more. He overturned the table and chair. He reached out for Noah's throat and kicked him so hard that Noah fell on the floor. A moment back he had been a mild boy. Now he looked mad with fury. Noah screamed with fright and called Charlotte and the mistress.
"He is going to kill me! Help! Help!"
he cried. Both the women came into the kitchen immediately. Charlotte seized the olive and gave him a blow with all her might. Mrs. Sowerberry thought that Charlotte had not punished the boy properly, so she held him with one hand and scratched him with the other. Noah saw that he had adequate support and rose to his feet. Then he began hitting Oliver from behind. When all the three were tired, they dragged Oliver into the cellar, and then Mrs. Sowerberry sat down on a chair and started crying. Charlotte saw that she would faint and gave her some water. She recovered sufficiently to say, "Oh, Charlotte, it is a lucky thing he did not murder us all in our beds." After some time, she told Noah, "Run along and call Mr. Bumble here immediately." Noah rushed off at once. When he reached the workhouse, Noah started crying in great sobs to attract the attention of Mr. Bumble. "What is the matter?" asked the man. Noah, who was twice as tall as Oliver, tried to gather sympathy. In broken sentence he began, "Oh, sir, Oliver, Oliver."
"What has happened to Oliver?"
asked Mr. Bumble in agitation.
"Has he run away, then?"
"No, sir, that he hasn't." Noah began with more confidence. "He tried to murder me, sir. When Charlotte came to save me, he tried to kill her, and then he turned against the mistress." To make his story more realistic, Noah began to groan and moan, saying, "Oh, the pain is unbearable. It is terrible." Noah's pretense was so real that Mr. Bumble was really alarmed. He set off immediately to the undertaker's house. A gentleman on the road We wanted to know why Noah was making such a lot of noise. Mr. Bumble said that he had nearly been killed by Twist, and added that the boy would also have to kill the maid and his master and the mistress if he could. At this point, Noah said that this was not true because the master was away from the house when all this was happening. When Mr. Bumble and Noah reached the house, matters had not improved. Mr. Soberry had not yet returned. Oliver was heard kicking the door of his prison loudly. Mr. Bumble kicked the door from outside and spoke through the keyhole. "Oliver!" he shouted. Oliver shouted back, "Open this door and let me out! Do you hear?" Mr. Bumble was shocked at Oliver's rudeness. He said, Do you know my voice, Oliver?" "Yes, I do," replied Oliver boldly. "Aren't you afraid?" "No, I'm not." Mr. Bumble could not believe the words he had heard. He moved back as though hit by a physical blow and stood silent on the road for some time. Mrs. Soberry had joined him by then, and she said, "Surely he must be mad. No sane person will speak like this." "No," said Mr. Bumble. "It is not madness, but meat. He had not He had got good food for a long time. You have given him excess of food, and see the result. Give him one bowl of gruel every day, and he will be set right soon." "Oh dear," said Mrs. Soberry. "Is the rewards we have got for our generosity?" At the point Mr. Soberry turned and heard the whole story, Oliver was brought out. He tried to tell everyone how Noah had said bad things about his mother. No one sympathized him. The mistress said that Oliver's mother deserved no better. Then the undertaker took him by the collar and gave him a terrible beating. After that, he was locked up in the back kitchen for a long time. Oliver did not move. He lay on the floor thinking of his sorrow. It was a cold, dark night. When there was silence outside, Oliver got up and slowly moved around. He removed the bolt on the door. He hesitated for a moment. Then he looked around carefully and fearfully. Then there was no one on the lonely road. He closed the door behind him and was free. He found himself in the open street. He began to take the road of the workhouse. He was familiar with the main road, but to reach that he had to go past the workhouse. It was a risk he was going to take. As he passed the garden of the workhouse, he saw only one small thin figure engaging in weeding the flower beds. As he drew close, Oliver recognized the figure as that of Dick, his friend of the early days. Oliver could not go away without talking to him. "Dick!" he called in a soft voice. "Is there anyone around?" The child came running when he saw Oliver. He said, "There is no one here except me." Oliver was happy to see his friend, but he cautioned him. "Don't tell anyone you saw me here. I am running away, Dick. I could not bear the torture I had to face. They would beat me and ill-treat me constantly. I am going to see the wide world and look for my fortune there. I want to say goodbye." Then he looked at the child's face and said, "Dick, you look ill. What is wrong with you?" "I heard the doctor say that I was going to die soon," said the child. "But you go away. I'm glad to have seen you. Don't stop here anymore. Someone might see you." Don't worry, Dick. I'm sure you'll be well again. I shall certainly meet you once more, said Oliver, and prepared to leave. Goodbye, goodbye, Oliver, and God bless you, said Dick. Before this, no other human being had spoken so sweetly and given him such warm farewell as the small child did that day. Oliver was overwhelmed. He would remember those words for the rest of his life. Chapter 4. 7 days had passed since Oliver had run away from his masters. The day passed like a nightmare. He longed to reach London. He had heard that it was a great place. There were plenty of opportunities for a boy who had spirit. He was told that no one died of hunger or homeless there, but it was a distance of 70 miles from his place. Oliver had no money and his dreams were difficult to fulfill. One morning he reached a little town called Barnet. He had covered the long miles on foot. It was only his strong will and determination that had carried him so far. Sometimes fellow travelers had taken pity on him and given him a little thing in charity. As the sun rose on the seventh morning, he found himself in front of a doorstep. He sat there helplessly. His feet was bleeding and covered with dust. He did not have the power to move another step. Oliver was looking longingly at the coaches that passed by. A boy walked by casually and disappeared from sight. Suddenly he became aware that the boy who had gone by just then had returned. He was standing on the opposite side of the road, staring at Oliver without blinking. The boy looked more like a grown-up man, though his height was very less. He was weird to look at. Oliver saw that he was very short for his age. He had a snub nose and misshaped eyes, which were sharp. There was a look of experience in the eyes where they should have been innocence. "Hello, there. What is the matter?" said the stranger to Oliver, coming close to him. Oliver told him the story of how he had been walked continuously for 7 days. "I am hungry and tired. I feel very ill." Oliver was almost in tears. "Oh, I understand. You have no money, but you want food. Well, come with me, and you will get food," said the queer boy. The boy took Oliver by the hand and gave him a loaf of bread and some ham. He also bought a bottle of beer. Oliver was grateful to see the food. He ate it to his heart's content. All the while the stranger boy gazed at him. When Oliver had finished eating, his benefactor asked him, "Are you going to London?" "Yes," said Oliver. "Where will you stay?" "I don't know." "Do you have money?" "No." The boy let out a surprised whistle. He put his hands in his pocket. Seeing his behavior, Oliver thought he must belong to this big city. He asked, "Do you live in London?" He asked, "Do you live in London?" The stranger said, "Yes, when I'm at home." Then he returned to Oliver's affairs and asked, "Do you need a place to stay in town tonight?" "Yes," said Oliver. "I have slept in the open since I left my place." The boy said, "I have to go to London tonight. I shall take you to be a respectful gentleman who will give longing for tonight. He will not demand any money for it." This was so good an offer to reject. The boy, whose name Oliver had come to know as Jack Dawkins, said that the gentleman would also find him a job. Dawkins also had another name among his friends, and that was the Artful Dodger. This Oliver was to learn much later. It was nearly 11 o'clock when his friends took him to meet this person. That was near the turnpike at the town where they entered London. In the locality into which they were made, Oliver eager to run away. It was filthy, and many villainous men cautiously moved around. Oliver had seen such a dirty and ill-kept place. Never had seen such a dirty and ill-kept place. The street was narrow and covered with mud. The air was filled with stench. Children moved around in all directions, crawling in the dirt. Men and women wrecked of drink. They all shouted, quarreled, and argued with each other. Dawkins led Oliver through all this and finally stopped near a door at the bottom of the hill. He quickly drew Oliver inside a dark passage and shut the door. He whistled loudly. A voice said from below, "Yes, have you got?" "Plummy and Slam," replied Oliver's companion. This seemed to be the password. As soon as the boy had uttered them, the passage became lightened by the glow of a candle. "You're not alone. There is someone else with you," said a man. "Who is it?" "He is my friend. He's my new friend." Where did he come from?" "Greenland." "Where is Fagin?" "I want to see him." "Go up. He's there. He's sorting out the goods." Dawkins took Oliver's hand in a firm grip and led him along the corridor. He groped in the darkness with his other hand. There was no light. With great difficulty they went up the broken staircase. The room they entered was no better than the surrounding which Oliver had seen so far. The walls were black with age and dirt. There was an old table in one corner. Beside the fire, on it was a candle and some food and drink. He saw a loaf of bread, a bottle of ginger ale, and some mugs. On the fire he saw some sausage being roasted. Then his glance fell on the man who stood beholding the toasting fork in his hands. He had never seen such a villainous-looking man before. He was old and thin, with fair red hair. He was a Jew. Oliver saw that many handkerchiefs were drying on a cloth horse. The floor was covered with numerous beds spread side by side. They were made of old sacks. 4 or 5 boys of about the same age as Dawkins were sitting around the table. They looked more like middle-aged men than little young boys. They were drinking and smoking with an air of confidence. The Dodger introduced Oliver to the Jew. "This is my new friend, Fagin. I told you about him." The Jew was very polite to Oliver. He bowed low over his hand and said, "I hope to have the honor of a long acquaintance with you, sir." Then he said to Dodger, "Take off the sausage from the fire and put a chair for Oliver near the fire." He saw that Oliver was puzzled by the huge quantity of handkerchiefs lying there. He said, "Oliver, you must be wondering why there are so many of them. We just took them out to wash them. That is all." He laughed heartily. The other boys came around, eager to become friends of the newcomer. After the initial formalities were over, Oliver was given a good dinner and some hot gin and water to drink. He ate well and put into one of the sacks. He fell asleep almost immediately.
Close your eyes for a minute, close your eyes for a second. I won't change my mind. What does getting deep now? What does getting deep now?